Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we find ourselves standing at the edge of something deep. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. The earth beneath your boots is soft from last night's rain, the air smells like moss and something older, and there's a shovel leaning on a crooked fence already expecting you. The sun has slipped away without ceremony, and the moon, bloated and bored, casts just enough light to make the graves look unfinished. You're the night shift gravedigger. Again, you didn't ask for this job, but the town healer coughed twice last week, and now 3 more bodies are waiting behind the church, all wrapped in the same wool blanket no one wants back. Your hands are already blistered, your back hums with that familiar ache, the one that promises it's going to rain again tomorrow. And of course there's a child in town who swears they saw something move in the cemetery. You know, it's probably a cat. It's probably. But cats don't whisper. This story isn't about knights or kings. No one writes songs about you. No one waits for your return. The dead don't thank you. The living don't look you in the eye. But night after night you dig. Tonight we're going with you. So before you settle in, please take a moment to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you are truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You start digging before the sun even sets because you've learned the ground lies to you. It looks soft, promises ease, promises speed. But then your shovel hits something hard. Not stone, not bone. Just stubborn, cold-packed earth that refuses to yield until your fingers bleed from gripping the worn handle. This was supposed to be temporary, a side task, a community duty, something you were asked to do for a week after the last gravedigger caught something awful and stopped showing up. That was 4 weeks ago, and you haven't had a full night's sleep since. There are no coffins now. The plague has made sure of that. Wood is too expensive, and the carpenter is dead anyway. Bodies come wrapped in old cloaks, tablecloths, or just the clothes they collapsed in, if they had any. Some come without names. Others come with names that no one wants to speak out loud, in case the plague thinks you're inviting it closer. You try to space the graves apart. At first, you're careful. You mark the rows. You leave room. You try to be respectful. But then more come, and more. And the churchyard, once a quiet, lonely patch of land, becomes a logistical nightmare. You bury people atop other people. You reuse corners of ground that still smell of last week's digging. You dream of someone saying that's enough, but no one does. The priest used to say blessings. Now he just nods from a distance, throws salt, and walks away like he's late for something else. You've stopped asking for help. You asked twice. The second time, the baker spat at your feet and said if you've got too close to his wife, he'd dig your grave with his own rolling pin. It was not an idle threat. You've started talking to the dead. Not dramatically, not with ceremony, just muttering, casual. You tell them about the weather, about the strange mushrooms near the northern fence, about the cat with one eye that watches you work night after night from the same tree branch. You even name the cat Edgar. He doesn't respond. But he also doesn't leave. Sometimes the bodies move when you lift them, not because of ghosts. You're not a child, but because decay is a strange process. Joints loosen, wrappings slip, limbs flop with a soft, accusing weight. You drop one once, and it makes a noise you never want to hear again, like wet wood snapping under mud. You apologize, out loud. You use the same shovel every night. It's not a good shovel. The handle is splintered, and the metal edge is more rust than steel. But it's yours. You've tried to borrow a second one once, just for help. But when you came back, someone had taken it. Probably to stir soup, or to threaten a neighbor. Tools are versatile now. You smell of soil, sweat, and something you can't quite name. It clings to your clothes even after you wash them, which you do in the creek, upstream from where the pigs drink. You tell yourself that helps? It doesn't. You were never afraid of the dark before. Now you dread dusk, because it means starting. And you dread dawn, because it means someone else has died. And someone else will ask, "Do we have room?" And you'll lie. You'll say yes. Because what else is there? You try not to be noticed. Not by people. Not by spirits. Duh. and certainly not by whatever strange logic decides who lives through this week and who gets carried up the hill, wrapped in a rug. You walk the edges of the village, you sleep, when you manage it, in a shack just outside the fence. Technically, it used to be a chicken coop. Now it's yours. It still smells like chickens. Still haunted by one particularly aggressive rooster who refuses to admit he's dead. People don't greet you anymore. That stopped sometime during week 2. At first, they just kept their distance. Now they pull their children away when you pass, like your shadow can bite. You once reached for a turnip at the market, and the woman running the stall screamed so loudly you dropped the coin, the vegetable, and your last shred of dignity all at once. You still think about that turnip? No one wants to talk to a man who spends his nights with the dead. It's not the work, it's the smell, or the idea of the smell. Or maybe it's the idea of the dead deciding you too friendly with the living. That kind of reputation sticks faster than plague boils, and lasts longer than the memory of who you were before all this started. You've learned the rules. Don't linger. Don't wave. Don't smile too much. It looks suspicious. Don't look sad. It looks guilty. Keep your face like damp wood. Blank. Unremarkable. Quietly rotting under pressure. When someone dies, they'll pretend they don't know who digs the hole. They'll carry the body to the edge, set it down, and walk away quickly like they're late for bread. They'll come after sunset and pretend you just happened to be passing by with a shovel. The graveyard itself is always colder than the rest of the village. Not metaphorically. Physically. The ground doesn't hold warmth here. Like it's agreed with the air to stay empty and unwelcome. The trees grow in weird directions. The wind is louder. And there's always, a crow that lands exactly when you need to concentrate, as if its job is to insult your timing. And then there are the visitors. Not mourners, not relatives. You'd almost be grateful for someone genuinely grieving. These are people who arrive after midnight in pairs, cloaks pulled high. They don't say hello, they don't bring anything. They leave small packages near certain stones, whisper names you pretend not to hear, vanish again like poorly rehearsed ghosts. You don't ask questions, you nod politely and keep shoveling. If they ever noticed you at all, they haven't shown it. Or maybe they're just being polite back. One night, a child follows you. She's no older than 10, bare feet, muddy face, a twig in one hand like it's a magic wand. You ask why she's here. She says she wants to help. You say no. She asks again. You say no again. She frowns like you've broken a very important rule about friendship. Then she points at the sky and tells you her father is in the 3rd star to the left. You nod. You both pretend that means something. The next night, she's not there. The next night after that, neither is her house. You don't ask. You never ask. You just keep digging. You have one shovel. It's bent slightly at the tip, chipped on one side, and the handle gives you splinters in the same 3 places every single night. Still, you wouldn't trade it. Not because it's good. It's not. But because it knows you. Or at least it knows the rhythm of your work. Lift, sink, twist, curse, repeat. Another gravedigger once offered to lend you his. Said it was newer, cleaner, less cursed. You declined. He died 2 days later. You're not saying it was related, but the shovel remembers. And lately the ground has been strange. It used to take 3 hours to dig a proper grave. You had a system. Now it takes 6. Not because you've gotten weaker, though you probably have, but because the earth is fighting back. You start to dig, and by the time you come back with the body, the bottom is filled with water, or sunk, or changed shape in a way you swear. It wasn't how you left it. The soil is heavy now, not just with rain, but with use. It groans. It shifts underfoot. One night you step into a half-filled hole and don't feel the bottom. That's when you stop measuring depth. You just dig until the voices stop asking for more space. You begin marking the graves with sticks, then with stones, then with nothing at all, because there are too many, and you've run out of things that stand upright. You try to remember who's where. You really do. But names blur. Locations blend. And soon, the only thing you're certain of is that no one is where they were supposed to be, including you. Some nights, you think the graves are breathing, not rising with spirits or haunted moans. Nothing cinematic. Just subtle movements, like the earth itself is trying to exhale what you forced into it. Press your hand to the dirt, and it's warm when it shouldn't be. Then, cold in the next breath, Once, you think you hear something underneath, a thump, or a knock, or your imagination trying to file a complaint. You don't tell anyone about that. If you do, however, have regular arguments with the apprentice digger from the next village over. He's 17, too tall, and believes he invented digging. Claims he can bury 5 bodies in one evening and still have time for soup. You hate him on principle. You've never met him, but his shovel, the fancy one, with the brass ring around the handle, appeared near your fence one morning, stuck into the ground like a challenge. You consider returning it. Then you consider selling it. Then you just leave it where it is, half hoping the original owner will come get it. Half hoping he won't. You still get letters from your brother. Short ones, badly spelled, full of advice about how you should just do something else. It's a cobbler now. Move to a town where shoes are still more valuable than plots of land. You tried once, but the ink froze and the rat chewed through the parchment, so now you talk to the shovel instead. You tell it about the sinking graves, about the boy with the brass handle, about the dreams where the ground opens like a mouth. You pause, then dig again, because there's still a job to finish, and only one shovel left to do it. There's a specific kind of mud that only exists in graveyards, a mixture of topsoil, grets, and the secrets people hoped would die with them. You step in it every night. At first you tried to stay clean. You wore the boots your uncle gave you before he coughed his last and became your 3rd burial that week. You scrubbed them after each shift, left them to dry on a hook outside the shack, and pretended it helped. It didn't. The mud found its way in anyway, through seams, through dreams, through the soft part near the heel that always splits too soon. Now, your boots don't come off anymore. Not really. They're more of a second skin, a wet, squelching, occasionally frozen skin that smells like betrayal and mold. The lantern you carry is another matter entirely. It's not reliable, and it knows it. Some nights it flares too bright, casting your shadow 10 feet tall against the headstones, making you look like a legend no one asked for. Other nights it dims to a whisper, flickering just enough to let the fog creep in and pretend it's a ghost. You whisper to it. Sometimes you beg. Sometimes you threaten. Neither works. The flame does what it wants. It's like carrying around a particularly moody squirrel, one that can set your coat on fire if you offend it. One evening, the flame goes out entirely, just dies mid-step. No wind, no warning. You stand there in the dark, mud up to your ankles, holding a cold handle and realizing that the silence around you isn't silent at all. There's breathing. Not yours. Not close. Just steady. Like the air itself has lungs now, and they're exhaling over your neck. You don't run. Gravediggers don't run. You move slowly, like someone who has nothing left to lose and no desire to make a scene. Count your steps. You hum a song your mother used to sing. Something about bread and bells and winter not lasting forever. You don't remember the words, just the rhythm, and it's enough to keep your knees from locking. Make it back to the shack and light the lantern again. It works, of course. Now it works, as if to say, I just wanted to see if you'd cry. You don't cry. But you do. Sit down on the floor, legs straight out like you're 10 years old again, and stare at the flame for a very long time. The cold doesn't like that. The cold in a graveyard isn't the same as regular cold. It's not about temperature, it's about presence. This cold watches. This cold waits. It doesn't bite. It remembers. You layer up. Wool over linen. Cloak over wool. But the chill still finds you. It slides down your spine like a wet finger. It kisses the back of your knees, right where you're most vulnerable. You've tried to ignore it, but it won't be ignored. It's patient like moss, like rot, like the kind of debt that doesn't ask for money, just ours. You used to think sunrise meant warmth. Now you know better. The sun rises, yes, but it does not comfort. It just reveals how many new graves appeared while you weren't looking. And you weren't looking. You were lighting your lantern. You were singing your mother's song. You were pretending your boots still had soles. You hear the cart before you see it. It never arrives on time. It never arrives quietly. The wheel wobbles like it owes someone money. The axle whines like a man 3 days from death. And the driver whistles songs that were already depressing before the lyrics got rewritten to include the word corpse. You don't ask his name. He doesn't ask yours. That's the arrangement. He brings the bodies. You take them away. and neither of you speaks unless a limb falls off during transfer. Tonight, the cart arrives late, again. It's well past moonrise. The lantern has started its nightly rebellion. And you halfway through digging a grave pretty sure you already used last week. But there's no time to second-guess geography when the smell hits you before the driver does. He waves from the road, cheerful as ever, his gloved hand covered in something that used to be someone. He says, "Bit of a pile tonight." You nod. What else is there to say? He jumps down with a squelch. The mud doesn't like him. He always wears those high boots, the expensive kind with buckles and hopes. The mud eats those first. You try not to enjoy it. There are 7 tonight, maybe 8. One of the bundles is small and doesn't move when touched, but you know better than to assume anything. You've seen bodies twitch from gases, from rats, from what the old priest once called residual mischief. That priest isn't around anymore. He's last seen muttering to the cemetery wall and trying to baptize a tree. The driver wants to chat. He always wants to chat. Talks about local gossip, about who's coughing and who's pretending not to. About a girl in the bakery who still has both her parents and therefore must be a witch. You nod occasionally, which he takes as encouragement. He tells you about a man who tried to bribe him to take a body to another village. Said his family plot was full, and he didn't want to mix bloodlines underground. "What did you say?" you ask. The driver laughs. Took the coin. Dumped him here anyway. You don't find it funny? You don't frown either. You're learning how to wear your face like a plate. Something flat, chipped, and only useful if it doesn't draw attention. The unloading is a slow ritual. You handle the bodies gently, not out of affection, that vanished weeks ago, but out of necessity. Rough handling leads to spills. Spills lead to extra digging leads to thinking. Thinking is the enemy. So you lift with care, lower with grace, and breathe through your mouth when you remember. When it's done, the driver offers you something wrapped in cloth. You hesitate. It's bread, still warm, stolen probably. But it smells like a memory that hasn't rotted yet. You accept, you don't say thank you. That's another part of the agreement. He leaves the way he came, slowly, noisily, vanishing into the fog like a man who's sure the world will end soon, but not before he finishes his shift. You take one bite of the bread. It's tough, dry. You chew anyway, because it's the best thing you'll eat all week. Usually the bells ring, and that's how you know someone has died. Officially, properly, with witnesses. In paperwork, and maybe a priest who still has the energy to pretend it matters. A single bell for a child. 2 for an adult. 3, if the family paid extra. 4, if someone important passed. Or if the bell ringer was bored and wanted to stretch the rope a bit. But tonight, there's no bell. You notice it halfway through your second grave. You pause, blink, and tilt your head like a suspicious dog. It's not the absence of sound. The night still creaks and moans and shifts like a tired barn. It's the absence of that one familiar clang. It's the metallic reminder that something needs to be buried. You wait. Nothing. It's not that you want to hear the bell. Don't. Every time it tolls, you feel something inside you curl up like a leaf on a fire, but not hearing it. That's worse. That means someone died who shouldn't have, or someone died who no one noticed, or worse, someone died who no one once noticed. You think about going to the church, just to check, just to see if maybe the rope snapped or the bell ringer fell asleep, or the wind changed directions and you missed it. But the church is uphill, and your legs already feel like they're made of regret and gravel. You stay where you are and keep digging. The grave you're working on collapses slightly at one corner. You try to fix it, it collapses again. You move to the other side. Same result. Eventually you stop calling it a collapse and start calling it architectural freedom. The dirt is wetter than usual. Clings to your shovel like it doesn't want to let go. Like it has something to say. By the time you finish, the fog has thickened into something that might be mistaken for a wall. You can't see the fence. You can't see the shack. You can barely see the grave you just dug. You stand very still, waiting for your eyes to adjust or your nerves to dull. Neither happens. Then you hear footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Not the wind knocking things around like a drunk with too many limbs. These are slow, measured, coming from somewhere behind the fog, which now feels much closer than before. Like fog with opinions, you grip the shovel, you call out. You try to sound bored. You don't. No one answers. The footsteps stop. You don't move. A minute passes, then another, then another. Eventually, you hear the sound of the cart. Not the bell, just the cart. Late again, like always. You breathe again. But deep down, you know those footsteps weren't the driver. You finish the night in silence. No more bodies, no more bells. Just the sound of digging and the feeling that something was watching you work, not with hatred, not with hunger. Just with the quiet judgment of something that understands graves better than you do. You don't sleep that morning. Not really. You lie in the shack with your eyes open, waiting for light, pretending that the silence is normal, that it means rest, not warning. The bells start again the next night. 2 of them. No explanation. You don't ask. There's a point where the earth simply stops cooperating. Doesn't yell, doesn't quake, doesn't rise up with dramatic flair. It just hardens. Quietly, rudely, without warning. One night your shovel goes in smooth, the next it rebounds like it hit an opinion. You try again, the same. It's not stone. It's something in between, like the soil has developed boundaries and decided you're the problem. You try moving to a new spot, same resistance. It's like the graveyard has drawn a line, and on the other side of that line is the word enough. But you don't get to stop. People don't stop dying just because the ground is tired. They don't even slow down. This particular evening, you're expected to dig 3 more. The bodies are already waiting. A young man, an old woman, and something bundled too tightly to tell. The cart driver didn't say much when he dropped them off. Just handed you a sack with a bit of smoked eel in it and said, "Sorry, these ones came late." You didn't ask how late. Pick a corner of the yard that hasn't caved in recently. You begin. The first few inches are manageable. Then you hit it. Not a rock. Just that same rebellious earth. Dense, dry, disinterested in your shovel. You lean on it. You stomp on it. You mutter all the words your mother told you not to say around soup. It doesn't budge. Consider lighting a fire just to warm it, just to soften the top layer. But you remember last time you tried that? The smoke drifted across the graves, thick and low, and something in the village thought it was an omen. For 3 nights, no one made eye contact with you. One boy threw a bead at your head. Instead, you dig narrower, not shallower, but meaner. You chip the edges, compromise on neatness. You pretend this is still respectful, even as the sides slope in like lazy elbows and the base floods from below. You wrap the body tighter. You fit it sideways. You convince yourself they won't mind. Somewhere around midnight, you pause to stretch your back and notice the tree nearest the southern fence has started leaning. Not dramatically, just enough to be unsettling. You didn't think trees could move so quickly or so deliberately. You stare at it for a while, shovel in hand. Unsure if you're re-waiting for the tree to do something else or just hoping you imagined it. You bury the 3, one at a time. No markers, no ceremony. Just dirt, muttered apologies, and the occasional grunt when the shovel gets stuck on something you don't want to identify. When you're done, you sit on a rock that wasn't a rock last week. You eat the smoked eel. Tastes like salt and secrets. You chew slowly, because that's all you have left. Time, teeth, and a body that hasn't yet joined the others. You look at the ground, you whisper, "Just one more," not as a request, as a warning. The ground does not reply. You used to carry 3 candles, one for your shack, one for the path, one for reading the names. Back when there were names to read, now you read down to half a stub and a lump of wax that sticks to your fingers like regret. The candle won't stay lit. The wick curls in protest as if it knows that guiding you through the graveyard isn't part of its job description anymore. You've tried tallow, beeswax, something someone claimed was blessed fat. None of them last. So tonight, you borrow one from the chapel. Just one. It's a fat, creamy pillar meant for saints and Sunday prayers. You tell yourself you'll return it. You won't. You tell yourself the priest won't notice. He already has, but he's pretending he hasn't. In the same way you're re-pretending you didn't tea-break the shovel handle last week and just keep using it like it is fine. The candle burns steady at first. It casts soft light across the graves, smooth and quiet, like a lie whispered well. For a moment, you think maybe this night will go smoothly. That maybe the worst thing you deal with is cold toes and a back that sounds like a gravel bag when you stretch. Then the flame flickers. Not from wind. There's no wind. Not from motion. You're standing still. It just shifts. Dips left. Sways right. Like it's bowing to someone you can't see. You squint into the dark. Nothing moves. But the flame doesn't stop its dance. You try to ignore it. Focus on the grave in front of you. One of the newer ones. Marked with a stick that someone carved a name into so shallowly, it already looks like nonsense. You dig beside it, trying not to disturb whatever lies beneath. You fail. The dirt here remembers your mistakes. The candle goes out. Not sputters, not fades, just off. You're left in the dark. Shovel midair, breath caught halfway between inhale and decision. You don't move. You don't blink. You wait for your eyes to adjust, for shapes to return, for the edges of the night to soften. They don't. You light the candle again. It refuses. You try 3 times. It stubs out like a snuffed thought each time. Eventually, you sit down on the overturned bucket, use as a stool, and press your fingers together until you remember they recold. You hear something. Not close, not clear. Just the sound of something that could be wind, or a bird, or the past, scratching at the present with dull fingernails. You decide to wait. Sometimes waiting is all you have left. A kind of lazy bravery no one applauds but everyone relies on. After a while, you speak to the darkness. You say, "One more, then I sleep." You say it aloud, to yourself, to the shovel, to whatever's listening, because something always is. The candle eventually lights, not because you tried harder, just because it felt like it. You finish the grave. You press the earth down gently, like folding a blanket over someone who's already asleep. You whisper the name, or what you remember of it. You return the candle. You don't go back for another. Some nights the ground gives you back more than you expect. You dig in the northeast corner, the one you've avoided for weeks. Mostly because the tree near it hums when the wind passes and you're not in the mood for musical shrubbery, but the other sections are too full, too soft, or too recently disturbed, and this corner at least looks dry. The first few shovels go smoothly. The soil lifts in neat slices, and for a moment you feel something close to gratitude, which is, of course, when things go wrong. Your shovel hits something soft, not loamy soft, not root soft. This is the kind of soft that pushes back. You freeze, shift your grip, and try again. Dull thud, like flesh that forgot how to be useful. You crouch down, brush the dirt aside with your sleeve, and find fabric. Old, damp, moth-nibbled fabric. The kind used weeks ago, not centuries, not long enough to be forgotten, but long enough to be ignored. This grave was supposed to be empty. You check your markings, which admittedly are mostly guesses scribbled in charcoal on a damp bit of bark. Maybe you miscounted. Maybe someone buried here without telling you. Maybe the ground is just trying to mess with you again. Whatever the case, someone's already here. Someone curled on their side, mouth slightly open, like they were telling a secret they didn't finish. You don't uncover the whole thing. You don't need to. You've seen enough faces. This one doesn't look familiar, which is strangely worse. You should move. Should pick another spot. Start over. Give this one the respect it clearly didn't get the first time. But it's late. You're tired. The other grave is half dug. The body waiting for it is starting to smell like boiled onions left too long near a fire. And the candle, the second one, stolen from the sacristy with even less remorse than the first, is already stuttering. You dig beside the body, not on top. Not exactly, just to the side. You widen the grave. You angle the new form gently, carefully, so it rests like a comma beside the period. It's not perfect. It's not proper, but it fits. You apologize quietly to both of them. No one answers. You finish the grave faster than usual. You don't linger. You don't pat the soil down with the usual care. You barely remember to whisper the name, and even that sounds like a question. You back away slowly, checking over your shoulder as if the earth itself might have decided to start keeping score. When you return to the shack, you take off your boots and don't put them near the fire. You leave them by the door, soaked and cold, as if trying to convince them, or yourself, that tomorrow will be dry. You don't sleep right away. You sit by the window and stare at the hill. Nothing moves, but you imagine you see a flicker. A faint glow like someone else lit a candle you forgot about. Maybe they did. Maybe they're still digging. There's a grave you started but never finished. You told yourself you'd come back to it. You marked it vaguely. A bent spoon, a cracked tile. Something you thought would mean unfinished business to your future self. But days passed, then nights, then more bodies, more urgency, more corners of the yard calling out with the urgency of the newly deceased. Now you stumble upon it by accident. It's half dug, ragged at the edges, partly caved in where the rain collapsed its ambition. Weeds have started reclaiming the mound beside it. The same way silence creeps back into places where words once lived. For a second you don't recognize it. You stand there, shovel in hand, trying to remember what you were thinking when you stopped. Why you left, why you thought you'd return. You stare into it longer than necessary. It's just a hole. But it looks available. You catch yourself entertaining the thought, not seriously, not morbidly, just practically. You're already here. The earth is halfway ready. Your back hurts in a way that doesn't feel like it plans to heal. Your eyes burn, not from sadness, but from days of squinting at things, pretending to be people. If you fell in, would anyone notice? Would they cover you by habit? Would the cat bring you a beetle in tribute? You'd shake the thought off like a cold draft. It lingers anyway. Instead of filling it in, you'd sit beside it. Legs dangling over the edge, heels pressing into the slope, dirt sticking to your boots like unpaid debt. The wind tonight is quieter than usual. It makes soft circles in the grass and smells faintly of wet feathers and old apples. You breathe it in slowly, as if you've got the time. Someone once asked what you were before this. You don't remember. Maybe you made shoes or cheese or complaints. Maybe you had a dog or a sibling. Why both? Maybe you had a name that wasn't tea whispered only when someone needed a hole in the ground. But that person, whoever they were, they've been gone longer than most of the people you bury. Now you're the man who digs, that's all. The one who knows how deep is too deep. The one who recognizes when soil has a temper. The one who doesn't ask questions anymore. Not even the easy ones. Like, is this spot free, or is that cough going to be a problem? Eventually, you get up. You don't fill the grave.
Not yet.
You smooth the sides a little, fix the edge where a bird tried to nest. You put the spoon back in place. You whisper, not tonight. It sounds like a promise. Might be a lie. Then you walk back to your shack, dragging the shovel behind you. It leaves a trail in the dirt, a line from the grave to the door, like a signature you never meant to write. You sleep, sort of, and when you wake up, the spoon is gone. They used to call you by name. A simple one, a name that fit easily in the mouth and didn't try too hard to sound important. You remember the shape of it? How it echoed off the stone walls when someone called you to supper. How it sounded irritated when your father said it, sleepy when your sister did. No one says it. It's been a long time since anyone needed to. They call you the digger. Sometimes him. Sometimes just a nod in your direction, like your presence is a smudge they'd rather wipe away without touching. Once you heard a boy call you the grave ghost. He wasn't wrong. You appear only after sunset. You speak to no one. You vanish by dawn. In this village that qualifies as legend, you stopped correcting them. Udanti missed the name exactly. You missed the way it felt when people used it, like proof you were still inside your skin. Now you just feel like a coat someone else forgot to take home. You weren't always this. Before the plague, before the dirt started whispering, you did something else. You're almost certain of it. Maybe you worked leather. Maybe you followed the tanner around and pretended to understand his complaints. Maybe you were a bad apprentice, the kind who ruined boots and fell asleep near the dye vats. There was a cat, you think. A black one. It hated everyone except you, which is to say, it hated you slightly less than the others. You had a friend, too. Not the kind you swore oaths with, or shared childhood trauma by firelight. Just a friend. A voice that laughed when yours did. A hand that passed bread across a table without comment. You remember the shape of his laugh, wide and careless, like someone who hadn't learned to regret yet. You buried him 6 weeks in. You dug the grave yourself. You placed a rock at the head, not because it meant anything, but because he hated flowers. You told him out loud, as if he was merely napping, that he still owed you to boiled eggs and a copper for the bread you bought last winter. Then you stopped speaking to the dead. It made the rest easier. Now, when you pass his grave, you don't look down. You just nod, barely. You don't remember his name either. Some evenings you think maybe you're still waiting to be called again, just once. To hear your own name said softly in the dark, as if someone remembered you. But that kind of thing doesn't happen here. Names fade fast in this soil. They slide out of memory like coins from a frayed purse. People leave behind only the shape of where they stood. There's a ledger in the chapel, names written down. Sometimes scribbled, sometimes spelled wrong. You used to check it, hoping yours hadn't made an appearance. Ash! Then one night you flipped to the last page and saw a gap where your name might go. It looked ready, expectant, polite. You haven't opened it since. It wasn't a vow. You didn't wake up and declare, from this day forward, silence. You didn't mark it on a wall or carve it into wood. It just happened. Like most changes, worth noticing, it arrived slowly, disguised as something else. Maybe fatigue. Maybe you meant to say something and forgot what it was halfway through the breath. You went a whole day without speaking, then two. By the third, you were half convinced your voice had gone somewhere without you. That it had taken a walk down to the river and decided not to come back. You didn't chase after it. The shovel didn't need words. The graves didn't ask for conversation. And the people, well, they'd stopped listening long before. Your mouth still moves sometimes. You caught yourself whispering to the wind, mouthing names you didn't remember, forming sentences you never finished. But no sound came out. Just the ghost of a voice, the shape of something that used to matter. Like a melody hummed through water, distorted and half lost, before it reached anyone who cared. You tried once to break the silence. A boy had wandered too close to a fresh grave, barefoot, curious, face streaked with soot and breadcrumbs. You reached out to warn him, opened your mouth, expected a shout, or at least a grunt. What came out was a cough, startling, dry, useless. The boy looked at you like you were a statue that had moved and ran. You never saw him again. The next time you spoke was weeks later, to a goat. A particularly bold goat that had wandered into the cemetery and was chewing a garland left for someone noble enough to merit flowers. You told it to stop. It didn't, but the sound of your own voice startled you so badly, you dropped the pail you were holding. The goat stared. You stared back. Neither of you acknowledged what had happened. After that, you gave up on words. Not out of stubbornness, just efficiency. Silence takes less effort. It doesn't demand much. It doesn't expect you to explain why you buried someone twice, or why the names on your map of the graveyard look like water damage and sleep deprivation had a child together. It doesn't ask you how you are. It doesn't pretend to care. It just waits, patient and heavy, like fog that never lifts and doesn't apologize for it. You hear conversations sometimes. Snippets drifting across the fields from windows left cracked open. From children daring each other to touch the cemetery fence. Laughter sounds like a language you no longer speak. Grief sounds familiar, but only in the way an old injury aches during the rain. One night, someone says your name. You stop moving. You look up, but no one is there. It was probably a dream, or a trick of the wind. Or someone else who had that name once, before the dirt took it and folded it away like a poorly written letter. You don't answer. You dig the next grave in silence. There's a book in the chapel, bound in leather, stained with years, thick as guilt. It's supposed to keep track of everyone who's born, who's baptized, who's married, and eventually, who's buried. A neat little chain of human. Attempts at permanence, scribbled in ink that fades like promises. You used to see the priest carry it under one arm, like a loaf of bread too sacred to eat. Now it just sits on a shelf. No one dusts anymore. You opened it once. Just once. After hours. After the lantern had given up, and the sky outside pressed against the windows like a tired memory, you weren't looking for anything in particular. Maybe just a reminder, be proof that you hadn't been made up entirely by fatigue and obligation. You flipped through the pages slowly, letting the parchment rustle like dry leaves that had forgotten how to fall. There were names, hundreds of them. Some scratched out, some underlined. Some written so beautifully it felt like their very existence had been curated for elegance. Others were crammed into the margins, squeezed between dates and mistakes, as if someone had remembered them too late. You reached the back. You knew the names. You'd buried them. Ghosts awaiting judgment. Then again, just to be sure. You searched for misspellings, variations, half-remembered childhood nicknames. Nothing. It was as if you'd never been born, never learned to hold a shovel, never turned down your brother's offer to leave the village and become something else. Anything else. At first, it felt like a relief. No record meant no responsibility. It's no one to chase you with debts or expectations. It's no one to say he was supposed to be more. You were free. But then the other thought came, slow and heavy. If you weren't in the book, then maybe the only thing keeping you real was the dirt under your fingernails. The next night, you wrote your name on a scrap of cloth, tucked it into your pocket, carried it with you while you worked, as if the cloth could remind the world you existed, as if the world had asked to forget in the first place. 2 days later, the cloth went missing. You'd laid it on a stone while digging just for a moment. When you turned back, it was gone. No breeze, no footprints, just gone. You didn't write it again. If a name has to be carried to stay alive, maybe it's already dead now. When you pass the ledger, you look away. You don't need it. The graves remember you, even if the ink does not. The shovel knows your weight. The fog hums your shape. The wind knows where to pause when you exhale. You're not in the book, but you're here, and you're the one who remembers where the bodies are. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's rare for the courier to stop by the cemetery. He doesn't like the hill. Claims the road is bad for the mule's legs, though you suspect it's more about superstition than slope. When he does appear, it's always sudden, like fog with a deadline. Paper and possibly resentment, he calls out. You don't answer? That part is expected. He holds up a letter. It flaps slightly in the wind, like a bird that hasn't yet realized it's been nailed to something. He walks it over, reluctantly. Stepping like the earth might bite, you meet him at the edge of the yard, hands dirt-streaked, face unreadable. The smell of ink and old sweat arrives before he does. It's for the priest, he says too quickly, as if your disappointment might become contagious. You nod. You take the letter. In handwriting so careful it looks like it was written by someone afraid of making permanent mistakes. You turn it over once, then again, hoping to feel some flicker of recognition. There is none. The courier hesitates. You wait for him to say. More he doesn't. He nods, then leaves the way he came quickly, as though chased by the idea of mortality. You stand there for a moment longer, holding the letter like it might start whispering. It doesn't. You don't take it to the chapel. Not right away. Instead, you carry it back to your shack. Sit on the overturned crate you call a chair, and stare at it. The wax is soft with age. The edges curled slightly, like even paper is unsure it wants to deliver messages anymore. You think about opening it, it's just a peek. Just enough to know if the name inside is one you used to know, but you don't. You place it on the shelf beside the 3 pebbles you once swore were lucky. The spoon with the bent handle and the scrap of cloth that might be yours or might be someone else's failed attempt to be remembered for the rest of the night. You can't stop glancing at the shelf. It feels like the letter is waiting, not just to be read, but to be claimed. Like it knows it's misplaced, like it knows it wasn't meant for someone who lives beside the dead and talks only to tools, and animals and wind. But still it stays. You never deliver it. The priest dies a week later, clutching a rosary and a look that suggests he remembered something too late. You bury him beside the chapel, alone, quiet, no service. No one comes to mourn, just you, a shovel, and the unopened letter still watching from the shelf. You never open it. Some names. It turns out were never meant to be read out loud. Asterisk, 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 it begins with a child screaming. That, in itself, is not unusual. Children scream. It's one of the few freedoms still afforded to them, to run, to yell, to believe that someone is always listening. But this scream is different. It's not the usual village squabble or stubbed toe. This one comes sharp and sudden from near the chapel. It cuts across the air like someone throwing a plate and hoping it hits the moon. You're in the middle of hauling a cart full of tools. The wheel is bent again, and one of the handles has started growing something mossy. You pause, wipe your forehead, and wait for someone else to handle it. No one does. Moments later, A woman appears, breathless, panicked. One hand clutching the child, the other pointing directly at you. "He's walking," she shouts. "He got out." For a second you think she means someone else. Around, there's no one there. It's just you. The child sobs harder, apparently. Someone buried last week looked a bit like you. That man, the one in question, had died under unpleasant circumstances. Not rare these days. A face swollen, unrecognizable, wrapped poorly and hastily dropped into the ground before too many questions could be asked. You remember digging the grave, though not the name? You remember thinking the shoes were too nice? For someone dying in a borrowed tunic? You remember the way the toes bent inward, like he'd been trying not to leave footprints now. The villagers think it was you. To be fair, you do look unwell. You haven't shaved in weeks. Your clothes are more patchwork than fabric. You move like someone whose joints have formed a labor union and voted for rebellion. And you're always seen at night, often carrying objects that could double as weapons or warning signs. You try to explain. You try to say you've always been here. Not after so long. Your mouth opens, and the sound that emerges is barely a sentence, more like an old hinge remembering how to move. Someone suggests testing you. They hold up a mirror. You blink at your reflection. It blinks back reluctantly. Someone pokes your arm with a stick. Another mutters something about garlic and the color of your eyes. Eventually, the blacksmith's wife, the one who sometimes leaves bread on your windowsill, though she pretends she doesn't, steps forward and says that's just the digger. He never died. You'd have to be alive to get that tired, and that settles it. The crowd disperses, half relieved, half disappointed. The child is still crying. You're still holding the cart handle, unsure whether to feel insulted or accidentally honored. That night you wash your face in the creek. It doesn't help. You still look like someone halfway between living and legend. At least now when people pass you, they nod a little longer before looking away, and no one calls you it again. It's early evening when the visitor arrives. Not a villager. Boots that haven't learned the language of mud, eyes that move too quickly for someone who knows what's buried here. He walks straight through the gate without hesitation, past the crooked fence, past the crooked stones, past the crooked logic that says no one comes here unless they have to. You're behind the chapel, repairing the latch on the tool shed for the 4th time this month. It broke again last night, not from use, but from weather, or ghosts, or whatever force it is that makes hinges give up in the presence of resignation. The visitor spots you, walks over, and says, "Excuse me, are you the keeper of this place?" Blink, keeper, as if this is a garden. It belonged to a man named Elias. Died recently. Cousin, I think. You pause. Elias. You've buried 3 of them. One whose grave marker got stolen and repurposed as firewood, you suspect. The man waits. He has a notebook. Real parchment. Real ink. No smudges. The kind of paper that expects to be believed. You tell him, as best you can, that you don't know which Elias he means. He frowns, as if that's unacceptable, as if people aren't dying faster than anyone can remember them. He flips through the book. It would have been late spring. He says, "They said he wore a green scarf. That helps less than he thinks. The scarf was likely burned, or buried, or stolen." You think of the ash tree Elias. He had a scarf. Maybe, could have been blue, could have been mold. You nod anyway. The man brightens, finally sensing what he wants. Closure. Or at least a directional lie. He asks if the grave is marked. "Say no," he asks. "Why not?" You stare at him, not cruelly, but just plainly. "But surely," he says, "there's some system?" He gestures vaguely at the rose. You want to laugh or weep. Or show him the map you once tried to keep a scroll of names, now mostly holes and ink stains. Chewed through by a rat with a taste for bureaucracy. Eventually, he writes something down. Maybe your name, maybe a complaint, maybe the word disgraceful. In looping, angry letters, he thanks you. He leaves. You don't correct him. Later that night, you dig by the ash tree. Find no scarf, no sign. Just bones and damp earth, and the feeling that whoever Elias was, or sometime in between, when the air wasn't heavy with dew or regret, It wouldn't be dramatic. You wouldn't make speeches or leave notes or gather your things. You don't have many anyway. It's just a spoon, a blanket with a personality disorder, and a comb that lost half its teeth to frostbite. You just step through the gate and keep going until the path stopped, looking familiar. You made it as far as the bend in the road, the one just past the split oak that always smells. It's like damp parchment and misremembered sermons. You stood there for a while listening to the wind behave suspiciously, like it knew something you didn't. The fields looked the same as they always had. Too flat, too quiet, too polite. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster screamed like someone had stepped on its pride. You took one step forward, then you realized you didn't know where you were going. Not just in the general sense, not just north or away or anywhere with fewer corpses, but deeply existentially. You didn't remember the names of nearby towns, or worse, that one who talks to the ground like it's listening. You turned back, not immediately. You stood there long enough to pretend you were thinking about it. Or maybe you were just slower. The gate creaked when you pushed it open, like a friend trying not to say, "I told you so." Inside, the graveyard looked relieved. You found yourself breathing easier. The shack still leaned to the left. The shovel still waited by the door. The unfinished grave near the fence still yawned like a mouth too tired to swallow. Nothing had changed, and somehow that made everything feel less awful. That night, sat by the fence with a crust of bread and a candle that had burned halfway to confusion. You looked up at the stars and tried to remember any constellations you once knew. Nothing came. The sky looked like spilled salt. You decided that was good enough. You think sometimes about leaving again? Maybe next week? Maybe after the ground softens? Maybe after winter? Maybe never. There's always a reason to stay, and the longer you're here, the more convincing those reasons sound, even the absurd ones. Like the shovel would miss you, or the graves might get offended. You never packed your things, just left the comb near the bucket and the blanket where it always is, curled in the corner, full of opinions. If someone asked why you stayed, you wouldn't know what to say. But the truth is, sometimes staying is easier than remembering where you were supposed to go. Asterisk, 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 you've always known how long a candle should burn. Not because you studied it, not because you cared, but because when you spend your life in the dark, you begin to notice the rhythm of wax and flame like someone might notice the seasons grudgingly, but with a certain resigned precision. Most candles, the cheap kind, last just long enough. For one grave and a half. The better ones can stretch into a third if you don't breathe too hard. But this one is different. It was given to you, though you don't remember by whom. Appeared one morning, sitting upright by the door to your shack, wrapped in twine, with a note that simply said, "Use this." The handwriting was sharp and precise, like it had been carved rather than written. Turned it over a few times, sniffed it, tapped the wax with a finger. It felt too smooth, too new, like something pretending to be ordinary. You lit it. That night, expecting the usual, a brief flicker, a sputter, and then the slow descent into guttering and smoke. Instead, the flame stood tall, steady, almost indifferent to the wind. You dug by its light, expecting it to die, didn't you? Muttered to it halfway through the second grave, almost apologetically, as if you'd underestimated it. Still, it burned. Even when the fog rolled in like a lazy accusation, even when the shovel slipped and you cut your palm and had to wrap it in cloth and salt, even when you paused an hour later to sit on a stone and consider whether the world was still spinning, the candle just kept going. By the third grave, you began to feel nervous. No candle burns that long, not unless it's been tricked or cursed or blessed by someone with a complicated sense of humor. You watched the wax. It didn't melt properly. It curled inwards, like it was folding secrets back into itself. The flame made no sound. You waved your hand near it. No heat. You considered putting it out. Instead, you finished your work, returned to your shack, and set it on the shelf. It still burned. You fell asleep with it watching you. You dreamed of nothing. Or maybe the dream refused to be remembered out of politeness. The next morning, it was still going. You stared at it for a long time, not because you feared it, but because you didn't understand it. And in your world, that was more unsettling. than most things. By the third day, you wrapped it in cloth and buried it behind the shack. You told yourself it was better this way. That same night, you used a new candle. It sputtered out within an hour, like always. And for the first time in a long while, the dark felt honest. You don't write in dirt anymore, not since the rain started mocking you. It used to be a small comfort, tracing names, initials, little marks beside a grave as if anyone would come by and care. You'd kneel beside a fresh mound, press your finger into the soft earth, and scratch out the letters slowly, like you were coaxing them from memory rather than committing them to it. But now, the ground eats words before you've even finished the first loop of a G or the tail of a Y. The soil here doesn't believe in permanence. Still, one night you try again. It's a small grave. A recent one, you remember? The girl, though barely. She'd been dropped off, wrapped in too many layers, like someone was trying to insulate sorrow. No name given, no note. The shape of a child and the smell of lavender that had given up halfway through the journey. You buried her near the old stones, the ones that tilt together like gossiping sisters. You didn't ask questions. There's no one left to answer them. But tonight, you kneel down beside the mound and press your thumb into the dirt, softer than usual, less combative. You draw a single letter and another. You don't know the name. You just pick one. One that feels round and kind. Leah, maybe, or Ellen, or something that sounds like it could be whispered without shame. You finish, you lean back, you stare at the name for a long time. It doesn't disappear, not right away. The wind holds its breath. The sky goes dim, not dark. You could swear even the frogs go silent for a moment, like the world is giving you space to pretend this matters. For 10 whole minutes, the name stays there. Crisp, real, unchallenged. And then, of course, the rain starts, not heavy, not cruel. Just enough to undo everything with an apologetic patter. The letters blur almost instantly. By the time you stand, they've returned to the earth completely, as if even the dirt regretted letting them exist. You don't try again that night. You walk back to the shack, your knees stiff from kneeling too long. No. You sit on the step, letting the drizzle soak your sleeves. Think about all the names that have lived shorter lives than the people they belonged to. Later, you dry off, you take a bit of charcoal and mark the inside of the shack's door with 3 letters. Not a name, just a shape. Something that looked like it belonged beside a grave, but didn't need anyone else to believe it existed. You don't look at it often. You don't need to. It's enough to know it's there, that it hasn't faded, that something stayed. Even if it's just a smudge that no one else would recognize. Asterisk, asterisk. It starts with a dream, or maybe a memory, dressed up in dream's clothing. You're standing in a field, not a graveyard, not even anything remotely resembling one. Just a wide, empty stretch of land where the grass grows uneven and the sky hangs. Low, like it hasn't made up its mind about the weather, there's a path. Beneath your feet, faint and winding, the kind that looks like it leads somewhere. Though you'd be hard-pressed to say where, you are wearing boots. Real boots. Not your usual waterlogged leather ghosts, but something firm and clean, tied properly with laces that still listen. Your hands aren't dirty. Your back doesn't ache. You are holding something, a tool, but not a shovel. A hammer, maybe. Or a quill. You don't know what that means, but it feels important. Someone calls your name. Not Digger, not him. Your actual name. It's the one you used to have. The one that disappeared from the ledger. The one you stopped whispering in your sleep. Out of courtesy to the silence. You don't hear it clearly. It comes muffled, like someone speaking from underwater, or through a wall made of wool and time. But you recognize the shape of it. It's yours. You turn to look, but no one's there. The dream shifts, as dreams do. The field becomes a lane. The lane becomes a doorway. The doorway opens into a room you almost recognize. It smells of tea and dust and old books with pages curled from secrets. There's a chair, and in it a figure. Not threatening, but just waiting. A shape familiar in a way that makes your chest feel like it forgot how to be quiet. You open your mouth to speak, and you wake up. The shack is cold. The candle is out. The blanket has wrapped itself around your legs like a well-meaning trap. You sit up slowly. The dream clings to your skin like morning fog, soft, persistent. Uninterested in your attempts to shake it off, you try to recall the name. Yours, the real one. You almost have it. It's there right behind your teeth, ready to jump forward and remind you who you used to be. But then the bell rings. Not in your head. Outside. In the chapel. 2 short chimes. Someone has died. Again, you pull on your boots, the soggy ones. You grab the shovel, the heavy one. You walk out into the early light, not because you're ready, but because that's what you do, every day. Without asking, and as you step into the mud, the name, whatever it was, slips away, like a fish back into water. You don't chase it because you already have someone to bury. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You don't notice it at first. It's just another lump of earth, tucked into the corner near the crumbling perimeter wall. The one that leans like it's tired of holding anything up. You've walked past this spot 100 times. You've leaned your shovel against the stones. You've even sat here once, eating a piece of bread so stale, it could have been repurposed as roofing tile. But today, for no particular reason, your eyes stop. The grave is tilted, not dramatically, just enough to be unsettling. The left side sinks more than the right. The top stone, what's left of it, has slid sideways like it's trying to escape a conversation. The soil has a dent, not a collapse exactly, but the kind of quiet sag that suggests something beneath. Shifted. Maybe recently. Maybe not. You crouch beside it, brush away the moss, and find that the stone isn't even anchored, just resting there like it was placed in a hurry. The inscription has long since worn away. You trace the grooves with your thumb, pretending they still spell something. It's a game you play with yourself. Pretend the names matter. Pretend you can hear them if you press hard enough. This grave isn't one you dug, which is strange, because you know every grave here. You know which ones are shallow because the ground froze too early. Which ones were dug with haste because the body was already going soft. Which ones collapsed during a storm and had to be redone while the wind tried to undo you. But this one, you don't remember it. You check your notes, if you can call them. That, scraps of wood, bits of cloth, scrawled reminders stuffed in a cracked jar by your bed. Nothing matches, no initials, no markings, no leftover ribbons or misplaced stones. It's a ghost of a grave, not the kind that holds spirits, but the kind that feels like it was made to hide from the record. You dig a little at the edge, just a few scoops. The dirt is packed tight, drier than it should be for this corner of the yard. The deeper you go, the more wrong it feels. No smell, no rot, no trace of linen, no splinters of coffin wood, just soil, compressed, stale, untouched. Stop. Someone buried something here, or pretended to. And whoever it was, they didn't want it found. You stand. Wipe your hands on your coat. The wind picks up, nudging the stone slightly, like it's tired of pretending to. You place it back the way it was. You don't say anything. You don't tell anyone. You walk away. Slowly, shovel in hand, trying to convince yourself that the tilt was just the result of time and rain and erosion and not a quiet decision made long ago by someone who knew you'd find it eventually. You've been digging in the southern row, the one closest to the field where geese honk, like they're auditioning for sainthood. It's an older section, mostly avoided now. Some days it gives way easily, too easily, like it wants to swallow everything. Other days it clings to the shovel with a stubbornness that feels personal. Today it's somewhere in between, grudging, but compliant. Like a servant who remembers your father's mistakes. You're not digging for a burial. Not this time, you're redigging. The priest, the new one, younger, less practiced in the art of looking away, asked if you could make space. There's a family wanting a proper spot near the edge, somewhere peaceful.
Somewhere with
Dignity. As if proximity to a low stone wall changes what happens under the ground. You start cutting the edge of an old plot, one that hasn't seen a visitor in years. Even the weeds have given up, replaced. by that strange gray moss that looks like the cemetery's own dandruff. You expect the usual, a collapsed coffin, maybe a bit of linen. Bones tucked into place like obedient tools. Instead, the bones are wrong. They're scattered, not in the way time scatters. Slow crumble and patient erosion, but jumbled. Careless, like someone was late for supper and needed the job done fast. The skull is tilted at an odd angle, pressed sideways against a ribcage that looks like it gave up trying to stay proud. One femur is missing entirely. Of pottery, glazed, blue dot. You pause. You brush the dirt back slowly, gently, the way you'd peel the blanket from someone who might still be breathing. More oddities, teeth arranged in a neat line at the grave's edge, like someone tried to plant them. A rusted clasp from a shoe. That wouldn't have fit the rest of the bones. And buttons. Far too many buttons. All piled together like they were afraid of being buried alone. None of this makes sense. You sit back on your heels and try to remember. Who was laid here? No name comes. No note in your records. Just a vague recollection of a hurried burial, maybe 2 summers ago. When the river drowned half the valley in the cemetery, it's filled faster than you could clear space. Maybe someone reused the grave. Maybe. Someone moved someone. Maybe you did. And forgot. You start to reassemble what you can out of instinct. Line up the bones. Separate the pottery. Set the buttons aside. But halfway through, you stop. It feels wrong. Like tidying a room that never belonged to you. You cover the grave. You tell the priest the space was too unstable. He nods, doesn't press. You move 3 rows down and start again. But the next day when you pass the spot, you swear the teeth have moved. Just slightly. Of tidy sorrow, now loop and curve like someone dropped the map and let the chickens finish the layout. You've done your best to keep them straight, but the ground has its own ideas. It forgets where one grave ends and another begins. At the concept of space, it overlaps itself, like a scribe who started a letter too close to the edge of the page and decided to keep writing anyway. Today, you're digging a fresh grave near the east corner, beside what used to be a well now dry, now home to a beetle. Colony with unsettling social dynamics. The soil here is soft, too soft, almost welcoming. That's suspicious. Soft means something has already been disturbed. You check your notes, a cracked tile with initials barely visible beneath soot. Just a jawbone, clean and curved, with 1 tooth missing and 1 gold. One shining like a guilty confession. You pause. Set the bone aside. Dig slower. Then more bones not laid out neatly, but spilled, like a basket that tipped mid-delivery. A shin here, a rib there, coined. Inexplicably wedged between 2 vertebrae. You dig deeper. Another jawbone. This one smaller. You stop counting after 3. You sit down and try to make sense of it. There aren't supposed to be bodies here. 1, maybe, but not 2, and certainly not 3. This is not a communal grave. It's not even supposed to be full. But the ground says otherwise. You wonder if someone doubled up during a time of desperation, plague season, flood season. They don't belong. To each other, or to any plan. It's a collision. Like the ground forgot it had rules. You recover the whole. The priest will ask, of course you'll lie. Of course stone was loose, you'll say, or the corner sunk too far. Something easy. Something that won't invite further inspection. Later that evening, you pass by again. Has sunk slightly, a dip no larger than a bowl, but just enough to catch your eye. You imagine the bones underneath shifting, elbowing for space, arguing silently in the dark. They had their time. Now they're sharing a closet that was never meant to be shared. You whisper an apology. You don't fully mean, you don't bury. Anything there again, but you keep the coin? Just one. Not because it's valuable, but because it fits perfectly. In your palm. Like something that finally found its place. Asterisk. 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 You start the grave in the usual way. Mark the spot. Check the soil. Stretch your back in that pitiful attempt at a ritual that fools neither your spine nor the wind. It's a good patch, dry but not stubborn, slightly shaded by a tree that sheds leaves like confessions. You begin digging, slow and steady, trying to ignore the creeping suspicion that this spot feels. Inconveniently eager by the time you reach a respectable depth, not quite 6 feet, but certainly a committed 4.5. You pause for breath. The sun hasn't set yet, but it's sulking behind clouds, casting a light that turns everything the color of yesterday's soup. You wipe your brow, adjust your grip on the shovel, and lean in to check the corners. Then you notice it. The dirt is slumping back in. At first, earth remembers things it doesn't want to hold, but this is different. You clear the edge again, pat it down, deforce it with stones, return to digging. And again, the dirt begins to slide back in, gently, slowly, insistently. Like a cat returning to a lap it was just brushed off from. You try not to take it personally. An hour passes, then 2. You make progress, but it's swallowed just as fast. Each scoop out feels like a scoop in. You begin to wonder if the ground here has a preference, if it's simply not in the mood. Maybe it resents your intrusion. Maybe it had plans. Maybe it's holding a grudge on behalf of someone who has promised a quieter corner. By now, your arms ache. Not the usual ache, not the familiar chorus of effort in cold air, but something more primal, like the soil is pulling back. You're not digging into the earth, but bargaining with it. And you are losing. You step away. Don't. Sit on a stone shaped by weather and forgotten by name. You watch the grave quietly reclaim itself. It's not dramatic. It's no gusts of wind, no sudden movement. It's just a subtle shift, a sinking, a slow refusal to cooperate. By dusk, it looks as if you never touched it. You leave the shovel upright, blade in the ground, like a white flag or an insult, depending on how the soil wants to take it. You don't tell the priest. You don't try again the next day instead. You move 3 paces left to ground that doesn't argue. You dig faster than usual, casting. Glances sideways as if the earth might change its mind and start correcting your work again. It doesn't, but that other grave, the one you abandoned, it still waits, still settles, still smooths itself over as if protecting something you weren't supposed to see. And every few nights, you walk past it and notice. You're repairing a grave marker, or what passes for one. A warped plank, the color of disappointment, with one nail still clinging on like it hasn't heard the news. It's from a section that always floods, a low patch near the west edge, that smells of mildew and misplaced ambition. You don't like this part of the yard? It feels like a cellar pretending to be a meadow, always damp. It's always a little too interested in your ankles. As you kneel to replant the marker, your hand sinks into the mud more deeply than expected. You tug it free with a squelch that sounds like the earth blowing its nose. Your fingers touch something solid beneath the surface. Not stone, not root, but wood. Smooth, splintered in places, curved in the wrong way. It's not part of the marker. It's a box. A coffin. One you didn't know was there, which is immediately strange. You know this section. You've dug here before, but this box is not on your list. It's old, but not that old. The wood hasn't rotted, at least not completely. You clear more soil. The lid is intact. The corners are uneven. You press your hand against it, gently, just enough to feel the give. Then you see the nails, not on top, but inside, art outward. Not the usual bent spikes from collapsing. Pressure, not damage from rot or animal claws. These are clean, sharp, deliberate. The wood around them splinters outward. Like something tried to open the coffin from the inside. Like someone had a final thought and it involved carpentry. You step back, not quickly. Just enough to let the wind pass through as if it were holding its breath. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe the box was reused. Maybe someone got clever. Maybe the coffin wasn't ever meant for burial. Maybe it was storage. That's a reasonable idea. People hide things. People panic. Maybe it wasn't a body in there. Maybe it still isn't. But you don't open it to check. You cover the wood again. Slower than usual, as if sealing up a secret you were never meant to uncover. You reset the marker, not over the coffin, but slightly to the left. Misdirection. A mercy. A shrug. You don't mention it to the priest. You don't record it in your notes instead. You go home and sit in the doorway of your shack for a long time, until the sky turns that grayish color between storm and sulk. You think about what it would take to nail a box shut from the inside. What kind of hammer? What kind of will you decide you don't want to know? That night, the wind howls through the cemetery. It shakes the fence. It rattles the gate. But the marker, the crooked one you moved, stays perfectly still. And the next morning, the mud has no footprints. Not yours. Not anyone's. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You're digging in what used to be the orderly row, the one where the stones were once almost aligned. On death, by giving it symmetry. Time has since had its way with that illusion. The names are now moss-covered mysteries. The stones lean like drunks after a sermon. The ground has settled in all the wrong places. The task is simple. Open a grave that's been claimed by a distant relative. They want the body moved. You don't ask why. People have reasons, usually sentimental or superstitious, and occasionally both. You just nod and agree. Digging up the dead is no harder than putting them in. It's the in-between, the waiting, the remembering, the pretending not to remember that causes trouble. You clear the topsoil easily. The grass peels back in one polite sheet, like it's tired of covering secrets. You wedge the shovel gently under one edge, pry it open, expecting the usual sight. Collapsed ribs, the ghost of a shirt, maybe a wedding ring, if the rats haven't grown curious. Instead, there are two skulls, side by side, but deliberately placed, like a pair of owls, watching the world with bone-still judgment. One is larger, the other smaller.
Ow!
Both worn, both human. You blink once, then again, expecting one to vanish, expecting this to be one of those tired hallucinations the wind gifts you sometimes after too many hours without bread. But no, they're real. You check the bones. 2 skulls, 1 spine, set of ribs, no feet, none. Not even a splinter of toe bone. You search the corners. You sift through dirt. You turn over every fistful of mud like a miser hoping for a lost coin. Nothing. The body, if it is one, is incomplete. It's 2. Or it was never meant to make sense. You sit beside the hole and run your fingers through your beard, which has begun to resemble the moss on the headstones. Wild, patchy, unhelpful. You consider all the explanations. A mistake? A rushed burial. A grave that was reused and not entirely emptied. A joke, maybe. Kind of dark jest only the dead find funny. You rebury them. Both heads. All the confusion. Spot. You don't even bother resetting the stone. Instead, you place a small round rock on top. Not for marking, but for memory. You'll remember that shape. The roundness of it. The weight that doesn't shift. That night, when you lie in bed, you dream of having 2 minds and no legs. You wake exhausted. You tell no one, and in the morning, when the frost peels off the grass, like a second skin, you walk past the grave and feel, just for a moment, like someone is watching, not with malice, just curiosity. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk some days. You tap the ground before digging, not out of ritual, not because anyone taught you, just because over time you've learned that sometimes the earth answers back. A thud means clay. A crunch means gravel. A soft sigh means rot or worms, or something that used to be important. But once in a while, it makes a sound that doesn't belong, a hollow ring, like wood over emptiness, or stone hiding something it doesn't want to explain. Today, you get that sound. It's under a flat grave slab, one of the oldest in the yard. The carving has nearly vanished, the name rubbed out by time and rain and the occasional boot. You don't even remember who's supposed to be underneath. The priest called it a forgotten saint once, but that was mostly because he wanted an excuse to charge pilgrims a coin to look at it. You kneel. Tap again, the same sound. Not just hollow, but wrong, like tapping a door that shouldn't be there. You clear the moss. The slab is heavier than it looks. You wedge your iron bar under one edge and lever it up just enough to slip your fingers underneath. The cold rushes out first, a breath that smells like stone and memory. Then you lift, slowly, carefully, as if you expect the dead to be offended by your posture. What you find isn't a body. It's a hole, a perfect rectangular cavity, maybe a foot deep, walled with bricks so clean they look recent. Inside, nothing. No bones, no coffin, no cloth, no note. Just the emptiness, sitting there like it was expecting company. You sit back. You wait. You stare at it for a while, unsure what part of it bothers you more, the precision of the shape or the complete absence of purpose. It's not a grave. Not really. Graves hold things. This one just pretends to. You drop a pebble inside. It hits the bottom too quickly. No echo, no shift. Just to feel. Just to sit in it. It's just to see what kind of silence it offers. You don't. Instead, you lower the slab back over it. The wind picks up as you do, brushing past your ears with a sound that might be approval or mockery or both. You pat the stone once, like a dog that won't fetch. You tell no one. Later that week, you find yourself thinking about it, the hole with no explanation. You wonder if it's ever been used, or if someone carved it for something that never arrived. Sometimes, a grave is a memory, and sometimes it's just a placeholder for a story no one had time to finish. You notice it the next morning. It's not dramatic. No upturned soil, no burst coffin, no skeletal limbs waving for attention. A grave that yesterday sat neatly between two crooked cousins, and today leans half a foot too. The left, as if trying to escape a conversation. Not just backward, which happens all the time with age and rain and the occasional bored goat, but sideways. It looks like it was nudged, gently, by someone with time and intention. You crouch to examine it. The dirt around the base is loose, not freshly disturbed, but not settled either, like it's been stirred without being turned. You check your notes. You're sure this was the Delwyn boys' plot? Quiet thing? Died 2 winters ago? Pneumonia? Or bad luck? Or both? His mother left a ribbon tied to the headstone. You remember because you had to bury it with the grave. She kept replacing it every time the wind took it. Eventually, you gave up retying it. But the ribbon is gone now. You circle the grave slowly. No footprints. No drag marks. Just mud. And moss and the same weary blades of grass that never quite grow right here. You prod the earth with your boot. Gives more than expected. A soft sink like bread gone sad. You decide to test it. You kneel. Dig just enough to feel the edge of the coffin if it's there. And it is, but it's not where it should be. It's further left. By exactly the amount the grave has moved. You pause, hand resting on cold, damp wood, trying to decide whether this is worse because it's subtle. A body doesn't walk away, not without help, not without reason, not without someone noticing. You cover it back up. You don't tell that priest. You've told him too many things lately. He stopped listening. You're unsettled, which is different. Lie there wondering who moved the coffin or what might have shifted below it. Was it rain? Was it something trying to get comfortable? Was it something else entirely? In the morning, you return to the spot. The grave has moved back, just slightly. Just enough the soil is smoother, stone is straighter. The air smells like old iron and apology. You nod once and walk away. You don't dig there. Again. Asterisk, asterisk. There's a stretch of the graveyard you call the Silent Row. Not because it's quieter. The whole yard is quiet except for the occasional crow with identity issues, but because no one visits it ever. No ribbons, no flowers. No whispered names or small offerings tucked beneath stones. It's as if the entire row simply disappeared from memory. A long sigh in the middle of the cemetery that no one wants to talk about. You start noticing small oddities. Markers that face slightly different directions, as though arguing about where east truly is. Stones with initials that don't match. Any of the records, even the ones written during the year, Everyone forgot how spelling worked. Dates carved backward. One marker that simply says here, which is unhelpful, even by medieval standards, at first. You think it's laziness, a batch of hurried burials done during one of the many times death outpaced decency. But the more you look, the stranger it becomes. Some graves are too close together, some too far apart. One has 2 markers, another has none. You dig, gently, in one of the blank plots. It yields bones, but the bones don't match. It's not just in age, which would be normal, but in scale. The femur is far too short, the teeth too many. A child, a collection. You cover it up quickly. You begin cross-referencing the row. With your patchwork records, broken slates, old cloth tags, that one page written in what might have been soup, nothing adds up. Either the names were never recorded, or they were deliberately scrambled. One burial has 4 names attached to it in different places. Another was clearly copied from someone else's page. The ink patterns match, like someone leaned too hard while tracing. You bring it up to the priest. He shrugs. Says it's a clerical echo, which is not a real term, but you let it pass. You ask if anyone in the village remembers who's buried there. He looks at you the way. Someone looks at a painting that makes them uncomfortable, like the image isn't wrong. Exactly, just too close to something real. No one knows. Or if they do, they've decided not to. You stop asking. Instead, you walk the row every few days. Not to fix anything, the stones refuse to stay straight anyway, but just to acknowledge it. To remind the ground that someone notices. You nod to the stones. You trace the here with your finger like it might one day spell more. You hum a little as you pass, though you don't know why. You never hear anything back. But one morning, you find a small, fresh feather placed carefully on the blank stone. No wind that night. No birds nesting nearby. Just the feather. White, soft, waiting. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's well past midnight when you wake. Not from a dream, not from a cough or a rat's insistent scratching at the walls of your shack, but from a noise so subtle it almost dissolves into the shadows. Faint scrape of metal against earth. The steady rhythm of a shovel, not yours. You lie still, breath shallow, listening as the sound moves closer, pauses, then shifts again. Like a slow, tired dance with the soil. You consider calling out. You don't. Instead, you wrap the blanket tighter, trying to convince yourself that whatever is out there has business with bones, not with you. The sound stops. You wait, minutes pass. The sound returns, softer now, like a whisper or a sigh. You realize it's coming from the graveyard. You creep outside. The moon is a thin crescent, barely lighting the path. The air is cold enough to pinch skin through your clothes. You follow the sound, careful not to step on stones or broken twigs. Every footstep a prayer. At the edge of the yard, you see a figure. Not the cart driver, not the priest, not anyone you know. Someone small, hunched. When the living refuse to look, they're digging. Not at a marked grave. Not beside a stone or a cross. Just in the middle of the yard where the grass has grown thick and wild, and no name has ever been carved. You watch. The figure works quickly but carefully, scooping earth, lowering something into the hole. You can't see what you can't hear words, only the quiet conversation between shovel and soil you want to approach. You want to ask who, what, why, but the words catch in your throat like old dust, so you stay, silent witness to a secret. Being laid to rest, when the figure finishes, they pause, stand, and look toward you, or perhaps through you. Their eyes glint briefly in the moonlight, something between sorrow and resolve. Then they turn and disappear into the mist, leaving behind the faintest impression of footsteps that seem to vanish before they touch the ground. You kneel by the freshly filled grave. No marker, no name. It's just earth, soft and waiting. You touch the dirt lightly as if it might speak back. Doesn't. But somehow you feel it, a pulse, a promise, a quiet understanding. You walk back to your shack as dawn bleeds into the sky, carrying the weight of a new secret, one that belongs neither to the living nor the dead, but to the space in between. You've heard the stories. The whispers that float just beyond the church walls, like smoke unwilling to settle. The priest who won't bless the unblessed. The man who draws lines not just on maps, but between the living and the dead, marking. Some graves as holy ground, and others as something else entirely. You didn't believe them at first. You wanted to think it was just a tale spun by drunks and children with too much time. But then you saw it yourself. The church is small, made of stone weathered by centuries of rain and prayer, smelling faintly of candle wax and old parchment. The priest, Father Alaric, stands at the altar. He's a tall man, thin, with eyes that seem to miss nothing, yet say very little. His voice is soft but carries weight, like a shadow falling slowly across the pews. One afternoon, a woman approaches. The churchyard gate. Her dress is threadbare, her hands trembling with cold or fear, maybe both. She carries a small bundle wrapped tightly in linen. "Child," she says, barely breathing. The priest watches silently as she lays the bundle near the chapel steps, then leaves without a word. That night, you see Father Alaric walk out with a candle and a book. Doesn't go to the usual graves. He stops at the child's bundle, opens the book, mutter prayers low enough to be swallowed by the wind. Then he closes the book sharply, without blessing the bundle, without lighting the candle near it. You asked the old sexton once what it means when a grave isn't blessed. He shrugs, says it means the soul isn't welcome. You nod, though. You don't fully understand welcome by whom? You wonder. Days pass, the bundle remains. No flowers, no visitors. Just a quiet spot marked by absence. People avoid it, like it smells of broken promises. The wind carries a chill there that never touches the rest of the yard. You begin to notice other places. Corners where the grass grows thinner, stones that look newer but are set askew, small piles of dirt without markers. Places the priest never visits. You realize there's a pattern. A boundary drawn not in stone, but in silence. You want to ask Father Alaric why he refuses certain graves? What judgment weighs so heavy that even death cannot redeem? But you never find the courage. Instead, you watch from a distance, watching. The priest's eyes flicker briefly to those corners before turning away. You wonder if the priest carries secrets heavier than the shovel you wield. If his prayers are prayers of protection or condemnation. If some souls are locked out, not by sin, but by fear of what they left behind, what they might return to claim. One evening, you follow him quietly as he walks the perimeter. Candle flickering against the dark, stops by a grave hidden beneath brambles. He traces a finger over the stone, pauses, then steps back without lighting a candle. You step on a twig. He turns, meeting your eyes with a glance sharp enough to cut silence into pieces. You say nothing. He nods once and disappears into the night. Asterisk, asterisk. You begin to understand that the priest's silence carries a weight heavier than any spoken sermon. It's a judgment not cast in thunderous condemnation, but in quiet refusal, a refusal that lingers in the shadows of the churchyard, like the smell of damp wool left too long in the rain. The unblessed graves are not marked by crosses or candles, but by an absence so palpable it feels like a wound in the earth. One evening, you walk past a cluster of these graves, barely distinguishable from the tangled weeds and cracked stones. Around them, the air there feels colder, but not from weather. It's a chill that seeps into your bones, like the earth itself is holding its breath, waiting. You want to reach out to touch the soil, to find some warmth in the dirt, but your hands hesitate. Even the ground seems to recoil. You remember the stories whispered by the old. Women in the village, tales of those who lived on the edge of grace, their sins too heavy for even death to wash away. Thieves, heretics, children born under dark omens. The priest's refusal to bless their graves isn't just about ritual. It's a final exile, a silence louder than any curse. You see Father Alaric often in the mornings, moving with a slow solemnity between pews and altars, carrying the weight of his decisions like a sack of stones. Sometimes, when you catch his eye, you see a flicker of doubt there, a flicker quickly masked by the practiced calm of a man who knows the cost of mercy. You wonder if he prays for those he denies, or if he believes they no longer deserve the grace of prayer. One afternoon, you find the sexton cleaning the chapel floor. The man looks older than time, his hands rough and stained with ash and dust. You ask him about the unblessed graves. He doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he looks up at the faded frescoes and mutters, "Not everyone deserves the light, but even shadows have their place." The words haunt you. Shadows have their place. What place is that? Outside the prayers? Outside remembrance? Outside hope? You start visiting the unblessed graves. When no one is looking, carry small bundles of wildflowers, not the bright ones reserved for saints, but the humble ones that grow in the cracks of the village walls. You place them softly on the mounds, whispering apologies you're not sure you mean. You don't expect thanks. You don't expect the earth to accept them. But it feels necessary, like carrying water to a dry well. One night, the wind carries a faint melody to your ears, a hymn, half-remembered, sung softly in a language lost to time. You follow the sound to the chapel door, where you find Father Alaric kneeling, candlelight flickering against his bowed head. He looks up as you approach, eyes tired but steady. Without words, he hands you a small scroll. It's a list of names of those the church has cast aside. Not forgotten, but forsaken. You read the names slowly, letting each one settle like a stone in your heart. You realize then that judgment isn't just the absence of blessing, but the burden of carrying it. You nod once, understanding more than you want to admit. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You notice the change before anyone else does. It isn't sudden, like a snapped branch or a slammed door. It's slow, a fading of sound, like a candle burning low, a voice retreating into shadow. Father Alaric, who once filled the chapel with quiet authority, now walks the aisles with a silence so deep it seems to press against the stone walls themselves. The villagers whisper about it. Some say he's fallen ill. Others suggest he's carrying a secret too heavy to speak aloud. You watch him closely. His eyes no longer scan the graves with judgment, but with something softer. Maybe regret, maybe exhaustion, maybe both tangled. Together like old ropes. One afternoon you find him sitting on the church steps, hands folded, staring at the horizon where the sun melts into the hills. He doesn't notice you at first. You clear your throat softly. He looks up, surprised, as if remembering where he is. His voice, when it comes, is barely more than a breath. "I have said too much," he tells you, "and yet not enough." You sit beside him. The stones are cool beneath you, and the wind carries a faint scent of rosemary and rain. You wait for him to continue. Doesn't. Instead, he pulls from his robe a small, worn book, pages yellowed and edges frayed like a life well-read and heavily questioned. "This," he says, holding it carefully, "is my ledger of blessings and refusals. Every name marked here carries a weight, some lighter, some unbearable." He pauses, eyes distant. "But there are those I wished I could bless, and couldn't. Not because of law, but because of fear. Fear of what that blessing might bring." You nod, understanding better than you'd like. Fear of the unknown, fear of the restless, fear of opening a door best left closed. It's a heavy burden to decide who is worthy of rest and who must wander in silence. He hands you the book. The pages are filled with names, some crossed out, some circled, some accompanied by cryptic notes, unquiet, bound, forsaken, shielded. You flip through carefully. The words feel alive, as if breathing beneath the ink. "Why do you keep it?" you ask. He shrugs. "Because forgetting is worse than judging, because even in refusal there is memory, sometimes. Memory is all we have left." You look up, meeting his gaze. There is no anger there, only a deep, aching sorrow that seems to stretch beyond words. As the sun dips behind the hills, you both rise. The silence between you is no longer empty, but filled with understanding. You walk back toward the graveyard, the ledger heavy in your hands, knowing that some lives are marked not just by their endings, but by the spaces left between blessings. The air in the chapel feels heavier than usual, like the stones themselves are holding their breath. You watch Father Alaric prepare for a service that isn't meant for the living, nor for the fully dead. It's a blessing unlike any other. Whispered in a tongue thick with history and pain, the graveyard is silent outside. But inside the church, the flicker of candlelight casts long shadows that stretch like fingers across the walls. The altar is bare, save for a single sprig of rosemary and a small, cracked bowl of water that has been blessed more times than you can count. Father Alaric stands before it, his hands trembling slightly, the weight of unspoken words pressing. On his shoulders, this blessing is not for a new burial, nor for a family waiting for closure. It is for a soul caught in limbo when the church refuses to claim, yet cannot release. A soul neither cursed nor forgiven, hovering in the silence between prayers. You do not ask whose soul it is. You already know, even if no one speaks the name aloud. It is the soul of the unblessed, the forgotten, the ones who walked the earth too far from grace and now linger in shadows, denied even the peace of a proper resting place. Father Alaric begins the ritual, his voice low and steady. Despite the tremor in his hands, the words roll out, old and heavy, like stones sinking into water. The bowl of water shimmers as he sprinkles it toward the altar, tracing invisible crosses in the air. The scent of rosemary fills the room, sharp and bittersweet. You feel the weight of the moment press into your chest, as if you too are part of the ritual, a silent guardian of those the world has forgotten. When the blessing ends, Father Alaric turns to you. His eyes are glassy, reflecting a mix of relief and exhaustion. "This is the last blessing I am permitted to give," he says softly. "Not because the church forbids more, but because I cannot carry the weight any longer. Not understanding, more than words can say, the burden of judgment is not light. It settles in the bones, hardens in the heart. You realize that while you carry the shovels and mark the graves, he carries the silent sentences that decide who is remembered and who is erased. As you leave the chapel together, the evening air wraps around you like a cold shroud. The cemetery lies beyond, a mosaic of stories told and untold. You glance back once, catching sight of the empty bowl on the altar, a symbol of endings and beginnings, of hope and despair intertwined. You walk through the yard, past the unblessed graves, past the leaning stones and tangled weeds. You think of the lives folded into the earth, some with names and some with none at all. And you know that in this place, mercy is measured in silence as much as in words. Tonight, the priest's silence speaks louder than any blessing ever could. Asterisk, asterisk, you. Expect the bell to toll every night without fail. Marks the rhythm of death, a slow somber pulse in the village's fading heart. One clang for a child, two for an elder, three for the respected, and a solemn ring for those who have fought long enough with the living. It's a sound you've come to rely on, as constant as the turning seasons or the creeping cold. But tonight, the bell is silent. The village feels different. Not just quieter, emptier, as if the absence of sound carved a hollow into the night air. You stand by the churchyard gate, shovel in hand, breath misting softly in the chill. You wait, you listen. You want to believe it's just the bell ringer, taking a rare break, or maybe the rope snapped, or the wind decided it wasn't worth the bother. But no bells. You wander through the graveyard, stepping softly over frozen earth and tangled roots. The unblessed graves seem to lean in closer, their shadows stretching unnervingly long under the pale moonlight. You pause by one, fingertips brushing the cold stone. You wonder if the silence is a message, or just an accident of absence. The village sleeps, but the weight of unspoken things hangs heavy. You think of Father Alaric, his silent judgment, his whispered prayers left unfinished. You think of the dead who wait, some blessed, some cursed, and others left somewhere in between. Their names erased by fear and time. You reach the chapel steps, where the wind catches your cloak and pulls at the edges like a restless spirit. The door is closed, the windows dark. You imagine the priest inside, his prayers silenced by exhaustion or resignation. You imagine the ledger open on the altar, names fading into shadows. You sit on the cold stone, the silence wrapping around you like a shroud. For a moment, you consider calling out to the priest, to the dead, to the empty night itself. But your voice is caught in the web of quiet, tangled and broken. Instead, you watch the sky. The stars blink, indifferent, as the night holds its breath. When dawn finally breaks, the bell tolls. Once, then twice. Then slowly, with a weary echo that seems to carry the weight of all the silence before. You stand, shoulders heavy, and prepare for another day. The bell has returned, but its absence lingers. A reminder that some silences are not empty, but full of judgment, full of waiting, full of stories that refuse to be told. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You arrive at the chapel just as the sun's first light catches. The stained glass turning the ancient colors into fractured rainbows scattered across the stone floor. Father Alaric stands before the altar, his back bowed not just from age, but from the weight of secrets he carries, like a cloak too heavy for one man. You hesitate before stepping inside. The air is thick with incense and something unspoken, the kind of silence that fills a room after a confession left hanging. Words swallowed by fear or doubt. You clear your throat softly and the priest turns. His eyes meet yours, full of weariness and a flicker of hope that you might carry more than just shovels and dirt. I need to confess, he says, voice cracked like old wood. Not to you, not to God, but to someone who understands what it means to carry burdens that can't be seen. You nod, though your hands are rough and unworthy of holy things. You sit quietly as he begins. He speaks of the unblessed, the souls denied rest, left to wander in shadow. He talks of his refusals, the lines he drew in the earth that separated the sacred from the forgotten. He admits to fear that by blessing some, he might invite darkness into the village, fear that his own prayers might fall on deaf ears. He tells you of a night when a family begged him to bless their child's grave. The child had died with sins too heavy for the church's mercy, they said. The priest hesitated, then refused. That night, he dreamt of the child's eyes, not angry, but full of a sorrow deeper than death. He woke in cold sweat, his faith shaken. I've lived with that sorrow every day since, he says. Sometimes I wonder if I should have spoken. The blessing, anyway. If silence has been my greatest failing, reach out, placing a calloused hand over his.
Ow.
The warmth surprises you both. The weight of his confession settles between you like the soft dust of ancient prayers. He thanks you for listening, says he's ready to rest, to pass the burden on, to someone who understands that not all blessings are spoken aloud and not all silences are empty. You watch him leave the chapel, shoulders a little less bowed, steps a little lighter. The stained glass catches the sun again, casting new patterns. Fragile, beautiful, and perfect. You realize then that blessing and refusal are threads in the same tapestry, each necessary and painful in its own way. And in the quiet between prayers, you understand the priest's true burden, not in what he says, but in what he cannot. You notice the candle first, not in the chapel, where dozens flicker softly, casting shadows that dance like restless memories on cold stone walls. No, this candle is in the graveyard, resting on a small flat stone near the edge of the unblessed section, where wildflowers refuse to grow and the grass curls away. Like a whispered warning, it's unlit. You don't know who left it there. Maybe a villager feeling the weight of forgotten souls pressing down on their hearts. Maybe the priest himself, a quiet apology left in wax and wick. It's maybe someone who needed to feel connected to something, anything, beyond the soil and silence. You approach cautiously, boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, breath catching in the cold air. The candle is thick, uneven, with wax dripped in hurried layers that tell a story of impatience or desperation. The wick is blackened, at the tip, as if someone had tried to light it but stopped mid-flame. You reach out to touch it. The wax is cool, unyielding. You wonder if lighting it would bring peace or invite more questions. Instead, you leave it be. You find yourself returning night after night, drawn by the quiet presence of that unlit candle. It becomes a marker not of a grave, but of an idea. A flicker of hope paused, waiting for permission to burn. One evening, a child from the village appears, barefoot, clutching a handful of wildflowers that look half-wilted and brave. She notices you watching the candle and hesitates. Without a word, she kneels beside it and places the flowers carefully at its base. You don't speak. You just watch as she stands, brushes dirt from her knees, and disappears into the shadows like a whisper on the wind. The next night, you find the candle's wick trimmed neatly. The wax has softened just enough to suggest someone touched it. Thought about lighting it, and chose not to. You begin to see the unblessed graves differently, not as places of exclusion, but as spaces waiting for acknowledgement. Waiting for the flame that might never fully ignite. It still holds the promise of warmth. You realize that sometimes mercy is not a grand gesture, not a shouted prayer or a blazing fire. Sometimes it is a candle left unlit, a flower placed. In silence, a quiet vigil held in the dark. You wonder if the priest knows? If Father Alaric ever returns to that corner of the graveyard, sees the candle, and feels a small easing of the burden he carries. You think maybe, just maybe, that unlit candle is his confession, the one that needs no words. And you decide to keep watching over it one morning. Before the sun spills its reluctant gold across the village rooftops, you find a letter. It's tucked beneath a loose stone near the chapel steps, where the moss grows thick and the shadows sleep longest. The envelope is simple, worn parchment folded unevenly, sealed with a wax stamp cracked from time and weather. No name, no seal of a family, just a heavy sense of something unspoken. You pick it up carefully, feeling the weight of words never meant to be read. The paper smells faintly of ink and regret, a scent that curls around your fingers like a whispered secret. You hesitate. Don't open letters that have no address. You don't answer messages that might not be for you, but curiosity, that old, relentless companion, wins. Inside, the handwriting is small, tight, hurried. The words crawl across the page like someone trying to outrun memory. It's a confession, or maybe a plea. The writer speaks of lost souls, of blessings withheld, of prayers that failed to reach their targets. There's talk of a child buried without ceremony, of a mother who wept in silence, of a priest who carried burdens too heavy for his shoulders. You recognize the voice, not the words, the feeling behind them, the desperation, the loneliness, the unspoken hope for forgiveness. The letter asks for one thing, that the unblessed be remembered, not with candles or crosses, but with stories. That someone speaks their names aloud so they don't fade into nothingness. You fold the letter back carefully, sealing the fragile hope inside your hands. You wonder who wrote it? A villager, perhaps? Or maybe the priest himself before his. The voice faltered. Maybe someone you never met, whose pain echoes through the quiet corners of the graveyard. You tuck the letter into your coat, close to your heart. That day, you find yourself speaking names aloud as you work. Not just the blessed ones, the whole tangled web. Names that stumble, names that fall, names that whisper in the wind like forgotten songs. You speak them softly, like a prayer, like a promise, like a lifeline thrown across the void. The village listens, or at least it doesn't stop you. Children gather near the chapel sometimes, wide-eyed, asking about the names you say. You tell them stories not all true, not all kind, but stories that keep the dead close enough to be remembered. At night, the unlit candle still waits by the unblessed graves. But now it feels less like silence and more like a quiet invitation. A call for light to come, one name at a time. And you realize that maybe, in this small way, you are the blessing they never received. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk one evening, just as the sky begins to bruise with the promise of night. You hear it, a faint murmur drifting through the village like a forgotten hymn. It's not the usual chatter of taverns or the clatter of carts returning home, but something slower, deliberate, a procession, silent, save for the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel and the occasional rustle of fabric. You slip quietly from your shack, boots muffled against the earth, and follow the sound. The village is shadowed and still, the warm light from windows flickering weakly against the creeping dusk. The procession moves toward the graveyard gate, a line of figures, cloaked in dark cloth, faces veiled, carrying something wrapped in heavy linen. They do not speak. They do not sing. Their silence is a weight pressing down on the cool air, a wordless testament to grief, fear, or perhaps respect. You watch from the edge, heart tightening. The priest leads, his steps steady, eyes fixed ahead with a solemnity that makes the very stones seem to bow. Behind him, the villagers follow, some with trembling hands, others with faces set like weathered stone. They carry the burden with quiet dignity, the kind that doesn't need applause. The procession stops beside a patch of earth long left unmarked, a place the priest has refused to bless. The linen bundle is lowered carefully, almost reverently, into the ground. The priest's hands shake slightly as he lays a hand on the soil, though no prayer escapes his lips. You wonder what makes this different. Why this unblessed ground, usually avoided, now becomes the final resting place for someone so dearly mourned. The crowd disperses slowly, leaving behind only footsteps and a lingering sense of something unfinished. You step forward when the last figure fades into the night, reaching out to touch the earth. It feels warm beneath your fingers, not with fire, but with the echo of love and loss. You understand then that blessing isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's carried in silence. It's an axe too heavy for words. As you walk back through the village, the night wraps around you like a velvet cloak. And for once, the silence feels less like judgment and more like a shared secret, one that binds the living, the dead, and those who stand quietly between. You don't remember digging this grave? Not exactly. Remember the night, the weight of the shovel in your hands, the cold that seemed to seep not just into your bones, but into your very thoughts? You remember the urgency, the way the bodies came faster than the prayers, the way the earth grew tired before you did. But this grave, it feels unfamiliar, like a shadow you've passed 1,000 times but never truly seen. You find it on the far side of the yard, where the grass is sparse and the stones lean together like old friends sharing secrets. There's no marker, no cross, no ribbon tied like a fragile promise. Just a slight mound, disturbed, but not enough to demand attention. It's a quiet place to quiet. You kneel and press your fingers into the earth. The soil is soft, more yielding than the stubborn clay elsewhere. You dig just a little, careful, as if disturbing something fragile. The dirt crumbles easily, revealing a patch of worn linen beneath. You brush it gently, heart catching at the thought of what lies below. You pull back enough to see a small bundle wrapped hastily but with care. It's not a body you recognize. The shape is too slight, the weight too light. You wonder who it might be. A child, a stranger, someone forgotten by time and fear. You search your records. Nothing matches. No note, no plea, no prayer. Just this quiet spot that somehow slipped past your memory, or maybe never belonged in it. You sit back, on your heels, and let the silence fill the space between thoughts. The wind stirs the grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and distant rain. You realize that this grave, unmarked and unblessed, is a reminder of all the things buried beneath the surface. The stories lost, the names forgotten, the mercy withheld. You reach into your pocket and find the letter, the one with no address, the one you carry like a secret. You imagine placing it here, among the unblessed, among the quiet. A message for someone who might never read it, but would somehow understand. You smooth the earth over the grave with slow, deliberate hands. You trace a name in the dirt, one you no longer speak aloud, but feel deep within. You whisper it softly, letting the wind carry it away, knowing it will find its way home. You rise, shoulders heavy but lighter, and walk back toward the chapel.
Ow.
The sun breaks through the clouds, casting a tentative light over the yard. Grave waits patiently beneath the grass. It's a silent testament to a life both hidden and remembered. And in that moment, you understand that some blessings don't come with prayers or rites. They come with memory, fragile, fleeting, but powerful enough to hold a soul. Asterisk, 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 as the final glow of dusk fades. You find yourself lingering at the edge of the graveyard, the weight of the day settling deep into your bones. The air cools softly. Around you, carrying whispers of forgotten names and untold stories, the stones stand silently, their worn faces like ancient sentinels guarding secrets you may never fully uncover. You take a slow breath, feeling the gentle pulse of the earth. Beneath your feet, steady, patient, eternal. It reminds you that even in the quietest places, life and memory continue, weaving together the living and the dead in a fragile, endless dance. Thank you for staying with this journey through shadows and silences, through lives marked and unmarked, blessed and forsaken, as you prepare to rest. May the stillness wrap around you like a soft cloak, carrying you gently into dreams where even the forgotten find peace. And tonight, you are the one who must carry the basket once more.